OpenAI just dropped $100 billion on AMD. AMD's stock exploded 24% in a single day. Meanwhile, Nvidia shares are sliding. But here's the kicker: OpenAI only grew revenue by 16% this year. Let me say that again: only 16%.
So at that growth rate, it would take over a century to generate enough cash to pay for these massive chip deals that they're signing. So are we watching the biggest mismatch between promises and reality in tech history? Is this the moment that AI infrastructure arms race crashes into basic math?
You tell us. So we're going to go ahead and dive into that topic today. We're going to talk OpenAI, AMD. We're going to talk Anthropic. We have a handful of things that we want to discuss with you guys. Welcome back to the podcast. My name is Meet McKay. I'm here with Startup Hack. We are the father-son duo that every Tuesday morning we talk things business, tech, finance, and we kind of try to break it down into a kitchen table conversation where everybody gets to say their point of view and where we kind of try to guess where the world is going from here. So welcome back. Thank you guys so much for joining us. Good to be here with Startup Hack. So obviously, let's get the elephant out of the room. AMD and OpenAI announced this massive partnership. What was your knee-jerk reaction when you read that?
These things just don't add up. OpenAI is making moves that just simply doesn't math, right? They're signaling deals worth hundreds of billions of dollars where their actual revenue is barely keeping up with the pace of what they're spending, right? So today I'm breaking down, and we're going to break down together kind of why this AMD deal, what it really means, why the numbers really are telling a troubling story, and kind of figure out why everybody's just ignoring these silly numbers.
Yeah, no, 100%. It's a pretty circular. We like to call it a circular economy, where the money just kind of goes round and round. So let's go ahead and kind of break it down piece by piece here. So AMD announced a partnership to buy 6 gigawatts of chips from. Well, OpenAI announced a partnership to buy 6 gigawatts of chips, GPUs, compute power across starting in late 2026 from AMD. AMD was granted OpenAI a warrant to purchase 160 million shares at 1 cent each, giving OpenAI around a 10% in their company if everything performs. Now, it's important to know that there are milestones for this. It's not like they're just going to get those $160 million warrants of AMD at first. It's starting in late 2026, which also conveniently is when Nvidia's deal starts with OpenAI is in late 2026. The deal could generate tens of billions of dollars for revenue for AMD annually, but OpenAI only made $4.3 billion in the first half of last year. So the math isn't quite adding up. But this is coming off the back of Nvidia's $100 billion deal with OpenAI as well. So you can kind of see where the circular money comes from. Like OpenAI may not have the money now, but once they have their deal ready to go with Nvidia and then their deal ready to go with AMD, it's kind of like Nvidia is almost paying OpenAI to go get AMD chips, which is kind of funny. What's your take on that?
It just doesn't make sense, right? There's a reality check here. OpenAI generated $4.3 billion of revenue during the first 6 months of this year. So let's talk about the real numbers. Those are the real numbers, $4.3 billion, right? That's only 16% more than their entire revenue of 2024. So that means that 2024 revenue was approximately $3.7 billion total, and they're on track for maybe $8 to $9 billion this year if that growth continues. Now, Soros has been really popular, but right now it hasn't necessarily made them any money. So they burned through $2.5 billion in cash in those same 6 months. That means that with research and development costs, they're hitting $6.7 billion. So at a 16% growth rate, it would take roughly around 80 to 100 years to reach the revenue needed to justify this level of infrastructure investments. So OpenAI won't be cash flow positive until they hit $125 billion in annual revenue. Now, they don't expect that to be until 2029 at earliest, and yet they're already spending it in 2026. So I can tell you, anybody who's like, this is the exact same pattern that we saw right before the bubble burst of the .com era, right? The circular investing, where we saw it was even a warrant that was written by Cisco that was really some of the things. And when those numbers when everybody finally figured out those numbers couldn't add up, that was actually when the market crashed in 2001.
Yeah, but to kind of play devil's advocate a little bit, when you go to buy a house that's $800,000, you take out a 30-year fixed rate mortgage. So you're not necessarily paying that $800,000 up front. It's amortized. There's a plan. There's milestones that you need to hit. You need to make your payments, things like that. Now, OpenAI is not necessarily taking on debt yet, which that's when it would be really scary, is when OpenAI starts taking on debt. But right now they're taking on a performance-based plan to be able to deploy 1 gigawatt at a time. So that's kind of where my initial reaction is. Yes, you can add all these numbers up and it doesn't make a lot of sense. But when you break it down into like mortgage payments, it makes a little bit more sense. Now, not in terms of debt to debt, but it's not like it's going to be all up front, all at once. But my question would be, why is OpenAI trying to gain so much compute right now? Do you think it's for additional training, or do you think it's just to monopolize compute? What do you think?
So things like Source that we've seen, top the charts, right, lately is absolutely compute intense, right? Like they're basically saying, hey, look, we're going to create a social media network that's going to generate the video on demand, right? That kind of on demand, anything with the word on demand or real time requires just a massive amount of compute, as you and I well know, right? Like these are the kind of things that if you can pre-process AI data, that's a totally different story than if you try to do things on demand. That's where you get absolute crazy levels of needed processing. And so, I mean, that's the other side of the equation, right? There's all the math that doesn't math. The other side of this is that the amount of compute that they're talking about is almost about 1/15 of all of the current electricity used in the U.S. So that 6 gigawatts of processing power requires about 1/15 of the current amount of electricity we produce in the U.S. So they're spending electricity that we simply don't have.
Yeah. So that's where you're going to have things like Stargate. That's where you're going to have a lot more of these infrastructure building plays, which I think President Trump has been pretty good at openly insider trading within the White House. He's been tweeting that the power grid is not strong enough, that we don't have enough. So that makes me think as an investor, oh, do I need to go buy some energy plays? Like, do I need to go invest into some of these energy companies?
But they can't build it fast enough. They literally they can't.
Okay, so where do you see? I mean, I feel like they're gonna figure, like, if the money's there, they're gonna figure out how to build the energy infrastructure. Or am I wrong?
So the biggest challenge we're facing right now is that when they did originally build these nuclear projects, it took so much less time. So I've been seeing a lot of things recently about like the Golden Gate Bridge, right? We're hitting an anniversary there. They built that in 405 days. They can't even get the permitting in California in 4 years right now. So, something that when they originally built the Golden Gate Bridge, you can't do that anymore. Things take longer now. Regulation is ridiculous. And that's why the Trump administration is saying we got to cut these regulations to move innovation. So right now they're projecting that it takes about 20 years to build out a single nuclear reactor. One, not even the whole plant, just one reactor, to get one reactor online because of the level of red tape. So they're going to need somewhere around 20 to 30 different new nuclear not reactors, but plants, whole sites, in order to be able to possibly begin to even get in a fraction of the electricity that we're going to need for this.
Gotcha.
And the biggest problem in the meantime is people near these large AI sites, the big data center sites, they've seen their electric bill go up 267% in the last 2 years. And so that's the problem, is we're going to pay for it, because as electricity becomes scarce, it's not the companies that are going to get hit, it's all the consumers.
Yeah, no, I believe it. Okay, so now we're going to stay on this point, but I want to transition to a different angle. How do you think Nvidia feels about this? Do you think I've heard that it wasn't a secret that OpenAI would be diversifying their chip? I'm trying to think, their chip production, their chip manufacturing. I mean, not that they're manufacturing the chips, but where they're resourcing the chips from. Do you think OpenAI knew that do you think Nvidia somewhat knew that they're going to be paying for AMD chips, or do you think this caught them by total surprise?
No, I think they knew it. I could see them specializing these chips for various different uses. Like Nvidia's really good on training. I could see them do something like say, hey, we're going to use the AMD chips for like the real-time Soros processing or something like that, where they can specialize different things. It's not like it's going to be these generalized, like I think it won't be a generalized, it'll be very specialized. If I were building this out, that's how I would build it, is be like, hey, we're going to use the AMD for the Soros real-time processing and use Nvidia for all of our are, pre-training, which is another large use case, right? And so I think they'll probably build out different use cases for each. I think Nvidia had to know they were coming. I don't think there was anything in their deal that said the word exclusive on either side with AMD or Nvidia. And so Nvidia, really controls the training market, and that's really where the margins are at right now. But we'll see, because as real-time inference, and secondary workloads are needed, it'll be interesting to see. Now, right now, I know in every project that I've run, AMD runs at almost half the efficiency of Nvidia, and that's the reason why Nvidia has held the crown, is because AMD literally cost per watt, meaning like a efficient, gigawatt or terawatt, teraflop, processing. AMD is almost half, meaning half as efficient, meaning twice as expensive cost per watt as Nvidia, and that's the reason why Nvidia has been winning.
Got it. And the other question I had is, how do you think Microsoft feels about this? Do you think Microsoft is just laughing all the way to the bank because they have such a large stake in OpenAI? Microsoft recently listed OpenAI as a competitor, which seems kind of like an oxymoron, because Microsoft is a fairly large investor into OpenAI, yet they're also competing. How does Azure does Azure take a hit from this? Does Azure benefit from this? How does the cloud computing, because part of OpenAI's deal is that they're going to buy these chips either directly from Nvidia or through cloud processing companies like CoreWeave, Azure, any other cloud processing company that you can think of. I can't help but think that maybe, I don't know, what are your thoughts on this?
It's really hard to tell right now who's friends and who's enemies and who's frenemies. Like, you can't just, it's really hard to tell between them. I mean, I think the industry is kind of eating itself, and yet at the same time, and friends with itself. So it's really hard to tell. Like, Microsoft stock didn't seem to respond to this much, from what I can tell. Nvidia shares dropped only 1% on the on the announcement. So a lot of people wanted to say, oh, they're that's going to take a big hit. It's such a big play, and I think everybody's kind of in the wait and see. I think those who really know, but AMD's just, had two really large announcements in the last couple of weeks, and we've covered both of them here. So note to like and subscribe, because we do bring you a lot of this. But AMD's partnered with Intel, which is going to be a big move for them, and now we've got AMD partnering with OpenAI. So AMD's trying to play some big plays here and remind everybody that they're not left in the dark. And now, meanwhile, AMD's chips, their actual CPUs, are performing far better than Intel's at this point, and everybody's running away from Intel's because all their chips have been such a mess in the last 2 years releases. So AMD's still not, AMD's still in the fight.
Yeah, I wanted to go ahead and show you a chart. So this is the current, this is the current circular money. I can't even follow all of this, nor do I really want
I can't
to.
either.
But you have OpenAI that's giving money to CoreWeave. CoreWeave gives it to Supermicro. Supermicro gives it to Lambda. They give it to Google. Google's getting money. I didn't even know that one existed. But you're starting to just see these wires cross. And it's kind of like the meme of plugging the power supply back into itself. But who you don't see here is you don't see XAI. You're not seeing. So what's really hard is OpenAI is setting these really large unprecedented deals that for a company that with XAI that may not have as much capital right now as OpenAI does, or as much hype around it as OpenAI does, they're pricing out these little guys. Like, you're pricing out these smaller companies to be able to get compute for a cheap dollar, because OpenAI is hogging it all. Do you think that are they going to starve out these smaller companies that just can't afford compute?
That's definitely part of what they're trying to do, and it's definitely an arms race, right? It's definitely an arms race, and I mean, I'm not super worried about XAI and their ability to raise capital. I think so far they've been able to play in this game a lot better. And don't forget that Nvidia and XAI still have large partnerships, and Microsoft actually is running Grok on Azure. So there's plenty of other deals going on there with XAI as well. But yeah, this just shows the absurdity of it. I mean, and the thing about it is that this isn't even all of it.
We don't see Palantir in here. We don't see XAI in here. We don't see some of your bigger plays. We don't see any kind of hardware in terms of
throw Amazon and AWS in there.
Yeah, I don't even know where they are. What does Amazon run? What do their GPUs run off of? Do you know?
So they're doing some Tensor with Google. They're definitely buying from Nvidia. They're also producing their own, and so then all of that gets incestuous as well, right? Like, and that's the whole point, is this circular logic, and this is where, I mean, this is exactly the stuff we saw happening right before the dot-com bubble burst.
So is there a difference? Do you think that because you're starting to see efficiencies within companies, you're starting to see real output? Is there a difference than .com?
I don't know. I use the analogy all the time, and I point back to it fairly frequently, like I just did, but everybody's saying this is too big to fail. And the problem is that in order for the bubble to burst at this point, almost every company you have on this map would have to take the hit. And are they really going to? And so during the dot-com, burst, there was maybe 10 companies that were really in the mix on this. As we just listed out, there's probably 30 companies that are in this circular logic at this point, and they're all like major cornerstones of the market. Not like small percentages, but like actual percentages of the market trading.
Something that I've seen in my lifetime was the circular money of, and it wasn't quite this bad, but the circular money of crypto with all the crypto exchanges, where you had FTX to Alameda, and that was just like the ones that were easy to follow and trace, and then you had Binance, and you had all of these that were circular, but it wasn't backed by equity. A lot of it was funny money, and so the party's going to keep going, in my opinion. Like, these deals are pretty far out, and so if these come, like, I'm sure these three companies right here, the Google, the Microsofts, and the OpenAIs, they have massive contingencies within their contract that if something turns south, that they're not the one holding the bag. That you're gonna have the CoreWeaves, the Lambdas, you're gonna have the Oracles. Those are the ones going to be holding the bag. So just an interesting thought that I wanted to bring up.
Yeah. Well, and now that you throw, so this one doesn't have AMD in the mix. So if you throw AMD into the mix now, what it could be doing is actually, so let's say that Nvidia did crumble for some reason in this scenario, right? Let's say Nvidia crumbled. OpenAI has hedged their bets now.
Yeah, which if you're OpenAI, that's what you would want. You don't like they're diversifying their chip manufacturing, because you also don't have AMD in here. You do have Dell.
The other thing is the old game is, if you want to go buy a car, right? The best way to do it is go shop multiple dealerships. I guarantee you there's some of that going on with OpenAI, between AMD and Nvidia right now. If you don't think they're playing the two against each other, they absolutely are.
Totally. Yeah. Sweet. Okay. So circular money, without a doubt, it's there. Now I want to, let me see if this can, so I want to
jump to Anthropic.
Yeah, let's jump to Anthropic. And then I have,
Okay.
after Anthropic, I have one more thing that I want to show you. Let me go to Anthropic really quick.
So while you're getting Anthropic up, so Anthropic landed its biggest enterprise deployment ever with Deloitte. This is huge, because really the crowning jewel that these AI companies want is the corporate deals, because these corporate deals come with large contracts, allows them to go secure compute, knowing that it's going to be paid for. This is a really big deal, and this is probably one of the largest corporate deals we've ever seen. Deloitte is rolling out Anthropic Claude to more than 470,000 employees, and the rollout will be Anthropic's largest enterprise deployment ever. Anthropic announced that its latest AI model, Claude Sonnet 4.5, in late September, and it's been getting really good reviews, both in coding as well as also in corporate use. And I know there's a lot of people like me that trust Anthropic far more than we trust OpenAI. Now, that's a somewhat of a praise, but at the same time, I trust them about as far as I can throw them.
Yeah, I mean, so they're gonna 470,000 employees, and I just asked Grok its ballpark value on what this would be, and it's saying $300 to $800 million over 3 years. Do you think that's on the low end? Do you think they quite hit $1 billion on this, or do you think that $300 to $800 million range is appropriate?
I think it's a little low. My guess is it'd be about twice that. I don't think you'll quite cross $1 billion on this. But I think it will be somewhere in that range. And, so when you're talking, we just talked about that OpenAI's actual revenue, right? So far this year is $4.3 billion, right? For the first 6 months. So if you're Anthropic, who's definitely, not as big as OpenAI, but you can secure something that's roughly, well, let's call it even a tenth of the revenue or an eighth of the revenue that of all of OpenAI's revenue, that's a pretty good deal. And
Yeah.
especially on a corporate deal. Like let's emphasize the corporate deal here, right?
Are you using Sonnet 4.5?
Absolutely.
And is it a massive jump from the last version?
Nope. In
No.
fact, the very first few days of using it, I had to kind of retrain a whole bunch of the stuff that I was doing.
Huh.
It did eventually get better, but I did every model change. That's part of the problem is when you build your company with any kind of dependence on this. So I use these for various, one-off type tasks, or if you're coding or something like that. But the problem with these is if you build a company, meaning like if you're building your own training system and you build a product and you build around one of these, every time the model changes, you have to go through a whole series of things, and they never give you previews of them. So you can't test it ahead of time. So it's like you wake up one morning, it's there. You might know a couple days ahead of time, but you still can't test it until it's launched live. And so unless you're one of the like 10 biggest customers, which most of my followers aren't, then like in that case, you're bound by whatever changes they make to these. And this is the reason why it's such a dangerous game to play, to try to build products around any of these any of these APIs. So that's why I really encourage people to build on their own, so that these kind of things don't break them, and also so that they control the algorithm and they control their own data. But it is really good. And so if you do need to use one for various different reasons, and we do have a couple of use cases where we do use these, but yeah, we saw some noticeable differences with the products that we've built around this that are calling into it. And we had to go and tweak some of our prompts after.
Deloitte's interesting because it's not necessarily like it has a massive coding infrastructure. I'm sure they do have
They
a
do.
good development team, but what
Mhm.
it's mainly used for is tax and audit services of their business, of their 300,000 business customers. So, do you think Anthropic, because there is so much data within coding, do you think that there is that it's the best data analytic LLM right now, where you can give it a pile of data and say, hey, find similarities or find correlations?
Yes. I think they are the best. I actually, in my own research, and actually I have some numbers to actually back this up, but with one particular client, we've done some pretty extensive review on it, and the Claude one always wins, has
Hmm.
won so far every time. And so absolutely, as we've handed it large sets of data. And see, the thing about this also is that with an enterprise deal like this, um, Deloitte will be given specialized servers that are not into the general mix. So they actually can, with SOC agreements and stuff like that, that's either part of this. They can actually then put customer data into this in a secure way that's not going to be used for training and not going to bleed into everybody else's data sources. And so that's also part of the deal that nobody really highlights in here. But when you go look under the enterprise deals that every one of these major carriers provide, that's where you get secure SOC level, safety in this. If you or I go jump in there and go buy our $20 a month or $200 a month, either one, and you try to use this and pump customer data into it, you're pumping it right into the cloud, and you're giving that away, and it's going to get trained on, and it's going to, like, it's not SOC level security. So in order to be like SOC 2 level security, SOC 2 type 2, you really have to have an enterprise level deal, and these are expensive.
They have Anthropic has a post money valuation right now of $183 billion. Do you and they're saying, this article is saying that they're keeping up with OpenAI and Google. Well, that puts Claude around a 40%, as 40% as valuable as OpenAI is right now. Do you think that Claude is going to close that gap, or do you think Claude is slowly going to lose their grip?
No, neither. I think they're actually going to be the number two, and I think they're okay being number two. I don't think they necessarily want to catch OpenAI, right? With the leader comes a lot of headwind, so they're okay riding behind OpenAI and just kind of winding off of them, right? And I mean, the difference is their margins are way better. Way better. Their profitability margins are far better than OpenAI. So Anthropic's not having any problems raising money. The ability. Name one other industry where somebody can go out and raise $13 billion in 6 months.
Yeah, that's tough.
I mean, there's literally not an industry that can do it.
Yeah.
And so they're okay. They're not worried about being number two, I don't think.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting perspective. Okay, cool. Do you have time for one more quick segment or do you got to run?
Sure. Yeah,
Okay.
let's do one more.
Let me open something up really quickly. Okay.
So while you're opening that, I think that Claude Code is among one of all the developers' favorite. Now they've been screwing around with their pricing model, and this has made a lot of people really upset recently. And we have seen a lot of people run away from Claude Code. But as with everything, there's back and forths and different things. So
yeah, great. Okay, so a lot of what we've talked about is OpenAI doesn't have the money. How is OpenAI going to fund these deals? And we've debated that. But let's talk about how OpenAI is going to monetize. And I feel like OpenAI is hitting the Mark Zuckerberg era of Facebook, where now they're like, okay, turn on the monetization switch. Funny enough, I believe they actually brought in one of Facebook's original call them a monetizer that helped them monetize Facebook and has helped monetize another company. I don't have a ton of that information on hand, but I do remember hearing that. So I want to watch this, and then I want to quickly touch on what's going on with how to monetize OpenAI. Let's take a look. It's 1 minute. Okay, so what is your initial reaction to that? And do you think that this is just a nice demo? What do you think about the practicality of using these apps? And is Spotify going to have to sign a deal with OpenAI, and is that going to help OpenAI's revenue growth? You're on mute.
yes to all of those. Sorry, I have a cough this morning, so I'm trying to save everybody from hearing me cough. The yes to all of that. So the way that these are connected is a protocol called MCP, which is Model Control Context Protocol. And so the irony is that this was actually a protocol that was actually codified by Anthropic. So actually now it's become industry standard. There are some other ways that some of these connect. Yes, they do have to have a partnership with every single one of these because they have to define exactly how the data travels, right? And so it's not just pure magic. This is why there will still always be a lot of development behind the scenes. OpenAI can do this, but comes into tons of different questions because until they get the age stuff figured out, you can't have a 13-year-old being allowed to book something with mom and dad's credit card, right? And so there's a ton of guardrails that have to go onto this. So it's totally possible. It's absolutely within reach. It's still got a long ways to go. And kind of like how when Andre Karpathy originally joined Tesla in 2012 and thought, holy cow, we are really near self-driving. The really near self-driving is still now, almost 15 years later and still not full reality. So I think it's a very similar type of analogy, right? And I think, can we do it? Yes. Are we within reach of it? Yes. Are there a ton of guardrails we got to put up? Absolutely. And those are going to take more time than they want to admit. The other part of it is how do they monetize on that, right? They can get paid every time they send one of those deals over. That means they've got to be tracking it. It means there's a lot. And then at the same time, those own companies then start to cannibalize their own revenue stream, right? So if you're Zillow and suddenly all of your traffic or a portion of your traffic, let's say 25-30% of your traffic starts coming from OpenAI, you're actually cannibalizing your own revenue stream.
Yes. I think that they're going to start signing massive deals with these companies like Spotify, and then it's going to be because one of the use cases that I saw recently was Ross Gerber tweeted on X that they landed their first $1 million client through AI. And we tested it. You can go into GPT and search best financial advisor in Santa Monica. He's number one that comes up, and he landed $1 million client through there. How valuable is that?
Super valuable. It's called GEO, and everyone's saying that SEO is dead. And there's a ton of debate out there in the marketing world about this right now. And I'm neck deep in a lot of these discussions. SEO versus GEO, they're both a thing, and they're both right. I do think GEO will this is the same story, cannibalize a lot of the SEO market, but SEO is still not going away, because and we just covered this deal about Anthropic signing those deals. So what happens if OpenAI signs an exclusive with Spotify?
Yeah,
But Anthropic's
it would start to hurt. It would start to hurt, like Apple Music, for example. It's interesting because Apple and OpenAI they're trying to be pretty good friends, and they have like the GPT built in with Siri, stuff like that. It's still not very good. But how does Apple feel about that exclusive partnership with Spotify?
So that's where you get back to your circle of your maps, right? With all the different lines and stuff like that. They won't be exclusive. That's the biggest thing, is you won't see exclusive deals with us. I don't think. I'd be shocked to see you be exclusive, because then if you're, what's that?
It's going to be pay to win, kind of like Google Ads, how you have like your sponsored posts. Those are going to take priority, obviously.
And that's exactly where it's going to come from. But with all the level of hallucinations and everything right now, there's no way you can do that. And that's their biggest problem right now. The biggest problem is that LLMs are designed to hallucinate. That's one of the biggest problems. And even OpenAI is still publishing, 35 to 40% hallucination rates, meaning that, and so if you're now tying at monetized ad deals against that, that's crazy.
Yeah. Well, I had a ton of fun. I think that the circular nature of this is going to keep going. And so kind of that illustration was a good one, but I feel like it only showed 30% of what's actually happening. And we're going to keep uncovering more and more. Did you have anything else that you wanted to cover that we haven't touched on yet?
No, I think we had a good list here this morning. I just think, I am not, less people think I'm predicting some huge doom and gloom market crash. We're trying to just figure out how to make sense of this. I honestly am in the camp that in some ways, I think we're too big to fail. I think that's one of the things, but at the same time, I still can't make the numbers match. So it's so we're in a funny spot with that overall, and it'll be interesting to see where the future goes.
Totally agree. Well, and if people want to learn about you and about what you do, where do they go?
Check out starterpack.com/Spencer. We love to build custom software solutions for companies.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us. We appreciate you guys. We see your comments here. Who will pay for these products? If you, for example, that scenario about the financial advisor wanting to get clients, I could see local financial advisors or local insurance companies or local people wanting to have their name pop up when you search Santa Monica, for example. So I think that there is a pay to win avenue for that. And you're right, that graph didn't show things like XAI, Anthropic. And yes, Musk is still wheeling and dealing deals. You have Samsung, you have stuff like that. And yeah, and you also, Elon is smart. He's not tying up these massive deals. So this is great. Thank you guys so much for joining us. We appreciate you, and we'll see you next Tuesday. Thanks for watching.
Thanks.